Right now, Beijing's housing prices have dropped back to about August 2016 levels. Some areas have seen drastic declines of 40% to 50%, while the least affected areas have still dropped by at least 15%. Nearly all residential communities in Beijing are experiencing price drops. If prices fall back to March 2016 levels, things will get really serious. That would signal a systemic financial risk. At that point, selling homes would be the only option, but the real nightmare comes if prices continue dropping. Imagine selling your home and ending up with nothing. Then banks start auctioning off properties, but even they can't recover their money. This could lead to a collapse in bank balance sheets, triggering a financial crisis similar to Japan's housing market crash in 1992.
A real estate agent recently reported that home prices in eastern Beijing plummeted by 80% overnight. And what about Shanghai, one of China's most resilient markets?
In Shanghai's inner ring, prices have dropped to just over 40,000 RMB per square meter. In Channing District's Zhongshan Park area, a small, old, 53.7 square meter, two-bedroom apartment is now listed at only 2.58 million RMB. Just a few years ago, it was unthinkable to buy anything near Zhongshan Park for just over 2 million RMB.
The market simply can't sustain itself anymore. Investors who speculated on real estate are now in deep trouble. Some say their tears could fill a lake. A commenter online joked, 40,000 RMB per square meter sounds cheap, but even if prices were cut in half again, they still wouldn't be low enough. The housing price index for March is out, and overall, second-hand home prices are still falling. In fact, the rate of decline appears to be accelerating. A Chinese research institute reported that while prices for new homes showed a slight rebound in March, this doesn't indicate a market recovery. It's simply the result of a government intervention. Meanwhile, second-hand home prices, which better reflect real market conditions, continue to decline, with signs of further acceleration. On March 31st, the Ministry of Housing and Urban-Rural Development released what they called the National Standard for Residential Projects. The key regulations include 1. New residential buildings must have a minimum floor height of 3 meters. 2. Buildings with 4 or more floors must have elevators. 3. Improved soundproofing for walls and floors. 4. Wider doorways for main entrances and bathrooms. And 5. Higher railings for balconies and other exposed areas. These new regulations will take effect on May 1st, and the government has made it clear that they are mandatory engineering construction standards, meaning all provisions must be strictly followed. Several state-run media outlets have claimed that this is the national standard for good houses. Most netizens in China have expressed skepticism. Some comments include, "What about the old houses? Second-hand houses won't sell now. Wouldn't it be more practical to build more affordable housing rather than hyping up this fourth-generation housing?" Others have commented, "They're trying every trick to get people to buy houses, but it's just taking advantage of them. There's no regulation to restrict developers. How much will this cost per meter?" With the current prices, most people can't afford it, and now they're doing this. One netizen posted that the current trend in the real estate market is that second-hand houses are being sold at lower prices to increase transactions, while new houses are being put on the market without much demand. After the new good house regulations come into play, people might prefer to wait and buy new homes built to these standards instead of second-hand homes, which could leave many second-hand home sellers in trouble. Mr. Zhang, an intellectual from Beijing, said that new rules will clearly increase developers' costs. However, this cost will not be borne by developers, but will inevitably be passed on to the home buyers. Mr. Zhang believes that while the government can encourage having elevators in buildings over 4 stories and increasing ceiling heights, it shouldn't impose these regulations as hard rules. Developers should be allowed to decide based on the market. He said, "I don't know if the Ministry of Housing and Urban-Rural Development has done any research before implementing this rule. I'm not sure if it fits China's actual situation or the real needs of the people." He also feels that the government seems to think it has immense power, showing a lack of respect for the market and the people. He pointed out that many recent government policies on real estate haven't worked, and despite the appearance of new measures, the housing market remains stagnant. At the National People's Congress in March, the Chinese government's work report mentioned good houses for the first time and emphasized stabilizing the housing market. Ni Hong, the Minister of Housing and Urban-Rural Development, introduced the new good house construction guidelines and revisions to residential project standards during a press conference. A netizen from Shanghai's financial sector said, "I think the main purpose of this policy is to curb second-hand housing transactions. Potential buyers may hesitate due to this so-called policy, and second-hand housing sales are the main reason for falling prices and home buyers facing mortgage struggles." He continued, "Actually, the government is contradictory. On the one hand, it wants to increase liquidity and encourage people to buy homes to boost the housing market. On the other hand, it doesn't want people to buy second-hand houses because those sales won't help developers with their cash flow issues or ease the financial burden on local governments. The sale prices of second-hand houses better reflect the true state of the housing market. So the government wants people to buy new homes instead, especially when the market is on the verge of collapse." Some netizens expressed support for the new policy, particularly appreciating the focus on soundproofing. One person said, "Finally, they're addressing the noise problem. Nowadays, even a cough or a sneeze in the middle of the night can be heard clearly by neighbors, especially when ordinary conversations can be heard between families. It's very awkward and there's no privacy at all. Another good point is that the current regulation requires elevators in buildings starting from 7 floors, but now it will be required starting from 4 floors, which is a positive change." David J. Huang, an American economist, argues that Beijing's new Better Home regulations are not truly about improving housing quality, but rather a strategic maneuver to control policy direction and resource allocation. He identifies 4 deeper motives behind the policy. The first is market segmentation and industry reshuffling. The new standards effectively raise the entry barrier, cutting out underfunded and technologically weaker smaller developers. Requirements like 3-meter ceilings and mandatory elevators are a death sentence for budget-conscious projects in 3rd and 4th-tier cities. The goal is to consolidate housing supply within state-controlled enterprises, ensuring that future urban residential development remains in the hands of trusted state-owned giants at both the central and local levels. The second is steering demand towards core urban areas. With the new standards in place, many older, smaller, and lower standard homes will struggle to sell, especially in lower-tier cities. This policy nudges buyers back towards 1st and 2nd-tier cities, where demand can be more easily controlled within a state-managed system. By doing so, Beijing reclaims influence over the free-flowing real estate market, ensuring that private housing demand is funneled into locations that align with government priorities. The third is a narrative shift from home delivery to home quality. China's real estate market is experiencing a systemic collapse of trust, with buyers increasingly worried about unfinished, low-quality, or devalued homes. By shifting the official discourse from delivering homes to improving housing quality, the government is attempting to rebuild confidence, or at least create an illusion of hope. Huang says that this is a propaganda tactic aimed at distracting people from unfinished projects and growing homeowner protests. Instead of addressing the toxic assets already sitting in the market, authorities are manufacturing a vision of future improvements to drown out frustration with present failures. He said that this is part of a massive effort by Beijing's authorities to suppress the voices of the unfinished building crisis. This is a typical example of institutional hypocrisy. However, high institutional standards do not guarantee proper enforcement. Under the CCP system, the fact that laws are available does not mean that they will be followed. As seen in the past, despite regulations strictly forbidding the misuse of pre-sale funds, unfinished buildings have been widespread. Similarly, while regulations claim to protect transparent pricing, it often comes down to connections and informal rules. Huang questions whether, with the new demands, quality will truly be delivered as promised. The fourth unstated reason for the new rules is centralizing control over construction approvals. Previously, local construction authorities had significant autonomy over building standards and project approvals. With these new nationalized regulations, Beijing is reasserting control, ensuring that all housing projects must conform to centrally dictated guidelines. This re-centralization of housing strengthens the Communist Party's grip over the real estate sector, making all housing development subject to direct oversight from the Ministry of Housing and Urban-Rural Development and the Central Technical Standards Committee. Huang believes the immediate consequences will include industry turmoil and construction halts, as many existing development plans become obsolete or require extensive revisions, causing construction delays, project cancellations, and layoffs in the short term. Developers must absorb higher costs to comply with the new standards, but with low sales and declining demand, their financial struggles will intensify. The midterm impact will be housing stratification. The higher regulatory threshold will further marginalize lower-income groups, effectively excluding them from the housing market. Many affordable housing options will disappear, accelerating spatial inequality between the rich and the poor. Migrant workers and low-income families will find it even harder to buy homes, pushing them into poor living conditions or dependence on rentals. In the long run, local governments may have to increase infrastructure spending and provide subsidized land to state-owned developers to ensure compliance with the new standards. This will further drain local budgets and deepen China's local debt crisis, as more funds are funneled into politically driven rather than economically viable projects. China has long suffered from shoddy construction and widespread regulatory corruption. Huang points out that Beijing's housing problem isn't just about setting higher standards, it's about enforcing them. China already has strict laws banning the misuse of pre-sale funds, yet unfinished projects are everywhere. Price transparency rules exist, but in practice, real estate sales are dominated by backdoor deals and corruption. So while the government mandates higher ceilings and mandatory elevators, who ensures developers won't cut corners elsewhere? What is the background behind the CCP introducing this policy? And what is the current situation of China's real estate market?
今天早上我隔壁邻居的房子被法院拍卖了。
This morning, my neighbor's house was auctioned off by the court because they couldn't pay the mortgage. The couple has 2 young kids. One just started primary school. The other is still in kindergarten. They were forced to move. The wife was wiping away tears while packing, and the husband stood nearby, expressionless and pale. The kids seemed oblivious to what was going on, still happily jumping and playing in the hallway. It's hard to imagine how they'll manage moving forward. They might even end up separated. Another woman revealed that her neighbors, a couple in Shenzhen, had invested in 150 million RMB worth of property, which lost 75% of its value, causing them to lose 90 million RMB overnight. For property speculators, losing money doesn't deserve sympathy. It's their own fault. Houses are meant for those with real needs, not for speculation. The sky-high prices before were due to speculation, and now the market is paying the price. This is just fate. A real estate insider posted, "The biggest speculator in Shenzhen has a monthly mortgage of 1.6 million RMB. I was shocked when I heard this number. Property prices have been falling for the last 2 years, and this is just the beginning of the collapse for speculators. I hear that many properties in Shenzhen are being auctioned because speculators went bankrupt. I think 90% of the speculators nationwide will face a similar fate, and they'll all go under."
北京买房1年赔100万，那都是赔的少的。是吗？
Buying a house in Beijing means losing 1 million RMB a year. That's actually a small loss. A friend of mine bought a property in Wangjing for 8 million RMB, with a down payment of 3.2 million RMB and a monthly mortgage of about 28,000 RMB. Now the property is worth only 6 million RMB, so they've lost 2 million. Plus, there's another 60 to 70,000 RMB in interest over the past few years. All the hard work has gone to waste. Now he's too scared to quit his job. In Zhuhai, a real estate agent shared even worse news. Property prices here have dropped by 30 to 50%. It's different in each area, but the situation is bad overall. Many communities here are ghost towns, with vacancy rates reaching over 90%. Some buildings have only one household living in them, and some have none. Despite having all the necessary facilities, these properties just can't sell. Only drastic price drops can maintain any transaction volume. Some say that in 10 years, properties will be worthless, but I'd argue it won't even take that long. Maybe in 5 years, properties will be worth nothing. You'll be able to buy a whole unit for just a few thousand RMB. Some even joked, if you keep saying the property market is crashing, they'll arrest you. Others said, in the future, today's commercial properties will become like industrial parks, full of weeds and abandoned, some already being demolished. On real estate platforms in cities like Beijing and Shanghai, many property promoters are posting high-quality videos, claiming that prices haven't dropped. They're promoting the idea that the market has bottomed out, and they're encouraging people to buy now or they'll regret it later. Some even claim the government has introduced massive benefits and that property prices will rebound soon. However, a real estate agent in Shanghai, who has worked in the industry for 17 years, said, "I have to risk telling everyone the truth. Don't fall for the hype. This so-called good house policy isn't going to fix the market."